Hello everyone, this is Huafang Li again. In this short video, we are going to talk about supervising and performance management or performance evaluation in the public and nonprofit organizations. So let's briefly talk about supervising. What do we mean by supervising? Basically, you want to monitor your subordinates or employees and make them to perform their jobs meets the requirement. And we also want to empower them so that they can take their discretion to excel the expectation from the organizational leaders, right? So two things tied to this. One is extrinsic motivation, because we will know when you work, at least you need to earn some money to make affordable living or decent living at least. So income is one critical issue related to that, right? How much you pay for your employee, that might significantly influence their performance. And the other thing we also talked about is the public service motivation, because that's the motivation motivates many of them join the public sector. Because if you compare the salaries or incomes over the life expense between different sectors, you'll soon realize public and nonprofit sectors are not as attractive as the private ones. So if you are going to rely on public service motivation to motivate your employee, then what does this imply to performance evaluation? How do you measure the performance, evaluate them, and then create a structure that can incentivize your employees, right? So this is under the whole structure called supervising and performance evaluation. Okay, so one of the things we can't ignore is pay for performance. An idea borrowed from the business sector works quite well for many of the organizations, right? Basically, what pay for performance means is that you pay your employees based on how well they perform, right? If they exceed the expectation, then you give them a bonus, right? If they perform poorly, then they may get less. So, which means you need to set the performance goals quite clearly, and then you define the merit pay system as well as the reward or bonus you are going to give them if they exceed the expectation. Okay, but what's the pros and cons of this pay for performance system? Now, obviously, there are many advantages for the pay for performance system, right? So first, they can boost at least the monetary motivations and morale if they are willing to work harder to improve their performance. And it also will increase productivity and help you nurture a high performance culture. And honestly, if you focus on pay for performance, it will force your organization to clearly define the goals, right? Otherwise, it's very hard for you to match the criteria of performance. Okay, so these are the major points for the advantages of pay for performance. But obviously, there are some disadvantages associated to the pay for performance system. So first, it may have a negative effect on teamwork, right? When one employee feel they are competing with each other, then may create extra stress that will negatively influence their performance. And second, it can distract the team objectives, right? If they are focused more on their own productivity, that may in line with the team performance. If you don't manage it well, that will mean team conflicts, which further harms the performance of the organization. And also, that pay for performance system will put too much weight on things that can be measured, while may or harm the long-term goal, which are not easily can be measured or can be quantified, especially, right? So that's especially true when nonprofit organizations adopt the pay for performance, which will distort or displace the goal of the organization, right? So that's what we call the mission drift or goal displacement. So this has more significant negative impact on an organization, public and nonprofit organization, in the long run. So that's the biggest negative thing if we focus too much on pay for performance. So generally speaking, like say, okay, if pay for performance works well, or at least for now, works well in the private sector, we would ask, how about the public and nonprofit sector, right? Does this pay for performance thing will also work in the public and nonprofit sector? We already talked about like the negative thing, right, causing mission drift, goal displacement, etc. And many other like negative things focus more on individually, and while forego the team and the organization's goal. So what are the empirical pieces of evidence? So the Weibel and the colleagues did a study, has two parts. The first part, they gather all the empirical studies have been done and done a meta-analysis, try to tease out what are the factors influence the effectiveness of pay for performance in the public sector. And then they followed vignette study, which is an experimental study, try to tease out, are there any hidden costs associated to pay for performance in the public sector. So of course, ideally, right, you would expect pay for performance also works in the public sector. But the public sector, as we already discussed, they have multiple goals, which means it's hardly to clearly define the goal. And then you also have a trouble in terms of create the proper criteria to measure employees' performance. Right, so pay for performance may not work in the public and nonprofit sector. One of the main reasons is because of hidden costs. So that means it might create corruption, or it may over justification, or it may crowd out your intrinsic motivations, right? Distort the meaning of the job, etc. So here I'm going to focus on one thing. It's called the either like a crowding out your intrinsic motivation. From the economic or traditional economic perspective, we would say the pay for performance is based on the rationality assumption, right? If you're rational, you try to maximize your monetary rewards, and then you perform well or perform best at your capacity, right? So then the organization rewards you with merits and a bonus. So this is more like traditional economic analysis. While on the other hand, if you based on the behavioral science, which means like many people join the public and nonprofit sector because of their public service motivation or pro-social motivation. So if you put a price tag on that, if you say, okay, we are going to pay you based on your performance, then it may distort the meaning of the public and the nonprofit work, right? Because they join this is not because of you pay well, as we all know, compared to the private sector. The salary levels in public and nonprofit sectors are usually lower than the private ones. So they coming to this public and nonprofit sector may not because of a higher payment, but because of something else, because of they can serve the people, because of they are supporting a good social cause, etc. Right? So if you say, okay, we are going to pay for your performance, then it distorts the meaning of their job. So they may, that may reduce their efforts and further impact their performance negatively. So based on the previous empirical study, and the meta-analysis shows actually you need to divide the tasks into two different types. One is like boring, routine, tedious. It's not that interesting, right? And the other one are interesting tasks. So if you look at this, you'll find the pay for performance actually will distort, especially for the interesting tasks. So basically means if this is an interesting task, and then you say, okay, I'm going to pay for your performance in the public sector, then the employees simply will not do that, and they will not perform well, and quite the opposite, they actually perform worse, right? Because that distorts the meaning of their job, as we already discussed. All right, so the theory behind this is as predicted by the traditional economic analysis, pay for performance might cause a price effect, which means then the cognitive shift it strengthens the economic incentive, or strengthens the intrinsic motivation for their behavior because you pay better performance, right? So the higher the price, the higher level of performance. It's the idea behind this traditional view. And at the same time, on the other hand, as we discussed about the behavioral perspective, then if you pay for performance, that diminishes the meaning of their job. So that weakens the intrinsic motivation for employees' behavior. So that will cause like intrinsic crowding out effects because they simply will not perform as expected. So the overall effects might depend on the strength of these two opposing effects, right? So for the price effect, if you pay higher, then you simply expect a higher level of performance, while for on the simultaneously, if we are looking at intrinsic crowding out effects, that means if you pay higher, that can actually negatively impact employees' performance, right? So pay for performance either can hurt or promote personal efforts, personal performance in the public sector. So what are the evidence? Again, we possibly need to look at the pay for performance idea and the cross intrinsic motivations, because that's the most important part we are looking for here, right? So if people with intrinsic motivations, and if you pay for people, say those with a higher level of intrinsic motivation, they join the public sector, then you say, okay, I'm going to pay for your performance. Then as the results showed here, it's actually a negative effect. Again, it confirms the idea that if you pay for those with a high level of intrinsic motivation working in the public sector, pay for performance actually will diminish their efforts and have a negative effect on the performance. All right. So to summarize, the more intrinsic motivation was there at the beginning, the more of pay for performance can actually destroy that motivation. And even under the situation that the price effect is stronger, is larger than the crowding out, intrinsic crowding out effect, then will be hidden costs also increase. All right, so which means in the public sector, we need to be very careful when we apply the model, pay for performance model. All right, so that will be all for this short video. Thank you very much.